So today we got the, what is this, Eric? Aberfeldy?
Aberfeldy.
Is that how you pronounce it? Aberfeldy?
That's right.
Highland single malt Scotch whiskey, 16 years. Thank you for bringing this, Eric.
Yeah.
So cheers.
Got a nice sweet scent to it.
Let me smell it.
Yeah, I got it. Where did I get it? I think the Hong Kong airport.
You got it in Hong Kong airport?
Yeah.
All right, cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. To Voltron.
To Voltron.
Voltron.
Ooh. That's good.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of peatiness. Those
Not that
little,
much, though.
Not that much, but it's a malty kind of flavor, a little nutty, I feel.
Notes of asphalt.
You just really want to say ass.
But I like it. It's very good. All right. Rich, Claudia, thank you guys for coming.
Thanks for having us.
No problem.
Sorry, yeah, we were only set up for 4 mics, so whenever you speak, I'm going to swing the mic over to you.
And bop
So,
her in the head.
Yeah, so for the listeners who are listening, if she sounds kind of faint in the beginning, it's because we only got 4 mics. But we got 5 people here, so let's just get started. Rich, welcome back. You used to live in Shanghai for a while, right?
I did, yeah, for 6 years from 2003 to 2009. So
Wow. Okay, so those were that's like the golden years.
it was, yeah, I think it was. You know, I think in my time I saw like a really big change from the beginning to the end. But yeah, it was kind of like a really fun time to be here. You know, it was kind of before things were really starting to happen.
In what way? Like, what makes it the golden years, or what makes it fun times?
I think it was just like, you know, a simpler time in a sense, you know. I think it was like things were just starting. There were just like foreigners starting to come over and like things really starting to pick up. But just, it was just a really fun kind of time, I think.
Well, we have a term for it here on the Honest Drink. We call it the Wild Wild East. Back then, because
Exactly.
it was kind of like a new frontier for like foreigners coming here. And if you were an expat or you grew up, you know, out of the country and you came here for the first time, it was like a new frontier, and it was kind of like anything goes. And it was not as sterile and as civilized as it is today, obviously. So it was just it was a crazy time to be here, but because it was kind of like no rules, it was a lot of fun to be had as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's something, you know, that I enjoyed about it was kind of that chaotic sort of quality. And I think that's what a lot of people enjoyed about it too. Some people didn't understand it when they'd come to visit. You know, like I'd have friends come from like America or other places, and they just would say like why do you live here? Like it's so it's so kind of like messed up, you know. But I think that's what I enjoyed about it too. Was like it was kind of fascinating, and it was like always an adventure. Always like,
Yeah, you don't know how the day is gonna unfold sometimes, right?
yeah, I mean, like messed up stuff happened, and it, you know, you always kind of like were on your toes, so to speak.
I always say, like, you know, Shanghai is rough around the edges, right? And especially back then. But it's those roughness around those edges that gives it its charm. You know, when it's too clean cut and, you know, the edges are too straight and square and clean, then it loses character in a way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of, you know, if you look at the world, you know, that's something Claudia and I talk a lot about. Like when we travel, you know, there's a homogeneity to a lot of the world that's increasing, I think. You know, in a lot of places, you go somewhere and it's like fair trade coffee. We got the fucking, you know, quinoa, like acai bowl. Like everywhere is like increasingly the same, and you know, it's nice when you kind of like can experience something that's a little bit kind of outside of that, you know.
Yeah.
And so I mean, you definitely, it's nice being back in Shanghai and seeing it like clean and all that, but like, yeah, part of me misses the kind of rough edges.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
I mean, whatever pops in your head, can you throw any little story nuggets of, you know, things that happened during your stay between 2003 2009 that embodies this wild, wild East mentality?
Wild, wild East mentality. Well, I mean, you know, like just something really simple, like that I remember, like taking a taxi, for example. I was taking a taxi one time, and the driver just said like, you know, 不好意思，我要听一下. Like he stopped, he got out and just peed on the side of the road. He just started peeing like right on the side of the road.
That's fair game. That's
just
fair
like
game.
right there, like right on the road.
He's like, sorry, I just gotta unload.
Yeah, he's like, he's like, I'm sorry, I just got to take a pee like right now. And we stopped, and I opened up my wallet, and I didn't have any change, and I gave him like I gave him like 100. And then he's like counting out, like he's like or something, and I was like, but don't please keep the change. You know, it's just like so dirty. And then we just, you know, with Eric, we just took like a DD or whatever, and there was like an air purifier, and there's like, I don't know, like moist towelettes, and
and your taxi driver back then actually kept the change.
Yes, nobody takes tips here.
Yeah.
Today.
No,
It's less common now, but you know, there's some people that still do. But you're right, like just in a decade's time, really 10 years, because you left in what, 09, you said, right?
That's right.
2019, that's 10 years. You know, it's changed a lot. It's not obviously, we almost talk about this on the show, but the infrastructure has obviously changed. That's the most obvious thing when you first come here. But socially, like you're saying, people are less inclined to take tips. You have little details in the culture and society, like air purifiers in the cars, water bottles, the technology boom of just even having an app like DD here. The speed of change and the amount of change is crazy. And I can't, like, even for us, we notice it, but we get very, because we live here day to day, so we don't really notice the changes as much as a person like you, who you haven't been here in 10 years, and now, boom, you're throwing right back in. So it must be like a big change for you. Like, was it shocking?
A little bit. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, and I actually felt right at home when I moved to Los Angeles, because it kind of felt like an emerging economy when I moved there. Like, it's like a beautiful shithole is kind of like the way I described it when I moved there, because you have like these like pockets of extreme wealth, and there's like natural beauty and things like that, but it's like really run down.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's actually improved a lot, too, in the time I've been in Los Angeles. Like, a lot of people moved there, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of buildings and things like that have been, you know, kind of coming together. But poverty and homelessness there is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
And it's so bad that, like, plague has basically, like, typhus has broken out. I mean, there's, like, just... Like, you go to, like, Skid Row in downtown LA. I was working down there recently, and I have one of those, like, one wheels. You know, it's like that, like a go-kart tire on the board.
Skateboard with a wheel
yeah,
in
so
the
I was
middle.
riding it, and I was, like, riding down through there, and they have, like, the police blocked off this, like, street, and they were just, like, hosing down all of this, like, feces and, like, vomit,
Jesus.
and there's just, like, trash, and it's, like, it's fucked up, dude.
That's
and you
all
come
over
here,
California, too, right?
Yeah,
Not
it's a
just LA.
huge problem. And coming here, like...
Big cities, yeah.
Coming here, like, people like used to just cross the street randomly, like spit on the street, like, and now, like, I remember someone was trying to cross, like, before the, you know, it was time on the like the crossing, the pedestrian
crossing
signal, and the cop was like, no.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
And and like they like, it feels like people are cleaning things nonstop.
They are.
It's like I kept looking at the streets. I'm like, they're so clean.
They're sweeping the streets nonstop.
Like, there's water.
There's nothing to clean anymore. It's cleaned so often. It's almost like OCD hand washing.
Oh no, it is, because they have so much labor here. You know, everyone needs a job, right? So they have these jobs to fill. So they can have these jobs where they have plenty of people to fill these jobs and do these jobs, like cleaning the streets every half an hour. You know, basically, it feels like. You know, I don't know if that's true, but it feels like that.
Yeah, when we were in Lijiang just now, there was we were walking past a river. And there were trees over the river. It's autumn, so all the leaves are falling into the river. There's a woman scooping the leaves out of the river. Like, this is, these are like miles and miles of trees, like dropping their leaves in, and that was her job, just every day to keep this perfectly pristine river. Like
a pool boy, but for an entire river.
For an entire river, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
So what else, in your perspective, 10 years not returning to Shanghai, that really stood out to you that changed?
I think a thing too, because I came to China as early as like, what was it, like 99 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
I studied Mandarin in college, and I remember like watching TV on like I forget what the brand was, but like Panda Television or something. It was some like brand, and I remember someone that was like in my like study group saying like, oh yeah, it's gonna be a while before like Chinese products are ever like up to snuff or good or whatever. And now there's like a company like Digi, for example, which makes drones and gimbals and things like that, and it's like some of the very best stuff in the world, Yeah. And there's this impression of like, whoa, like China's kind of come up, and it feels like it feels a little more like ahead of the curve in some ways. It feels like futuristic.
Do you feel that in America, like because you live there, right?
I live there,
and do you hear this? Do you feel that? Because we live in China, so we don't really get too much of this feeling,
Like, in other words, did you feel that way before coming back?
Well, the thing that I've noticed, because I have been paying attention to it, is like like for example, like that's a good example, like that company Digi, But being in arts, being an animator, I've also seen like the quality of like films and animation increase over time, and even things like research, like Claudia's her brother-in-law is a scientist.
He's a physicist.
Yeah, and
my
he
brother-in-law is a physicist, and 10 years ago, he was at a conference, and he was kind of like ranking all the physicists by country. He's like, oh, Chinese physicists are like the worst. They're so shitty. All they know how to do is copy. And you were having a conversation with him just this year, right? And
yeah, I was asking him about it because there's I think a lot of people like in America there's like a weird sort of like anxiety or like wondering about like China, and so you see all these articles and I'm just like about like AI, like the AI like arms race and like 5G and like things like that, and I was asking him like what's the quality of like the research being done there now, and he's like, honestly, it's like it didn't used to be good, but it's like it's good now.
Yeah.
So you in a lot of different aspects you really see that. But like another really good small example from our trip was we were in Lijiang, and we went to this little it was like a little yogurt and bread store in this ancient town, which is like, it's quite touristy, it's quite but it's it's beautiful, it's really nice there. We went there and they have this thing, it's like coffee bread. It's this bread it's like a puffy bread made with coffee, and it has butter in the middle, and it
sounds delicious.
It's fucking delightful, dude. Yeah.
Well, is it like a caffeinated bread? Does it like have caffeine in it?
so
I guess so.
That sounds delicious.
It's really good. It was really, really nice. Like I was blown away with it. We went back a couple days in a row, but I the first day we went there and ate it, I asked the guy, I said like, is this like a Japanese brand? Or is this a Chinese? He's like, no, this is from Lijiang. Like we make it here. This is ours. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's pretty sophisticated.
We should actually approach that guy and franchise that brand. That can be a big thing. You know what I mean?
It sounds legit.
Right? No,
JJ is
I mean, if they're making it locally there, no one else really has this. We should go and check it out.
I thought it was JJ Dong Dong, but it's a character for Ding. So it's actually like Ding Ding Dong Dong. I thought it was JJ Dong Dong. Or something.
Got the perfect name already.
Oh, Ding looks like a J.
Yeah, it looks-
we were like Googling it, we couldn't find it.
I was like, where's JJ Dong Dong?
It's Ding, right? It looks like that. So this is for the listeners out there that know Chinese. The character of Ding looks like a J, so that's why he's saying that.
That's really cool, man. So I think going back to what you were saying in terms of like China coming up, especially with technology and AI, I think that's and we're not going to get political on this episode today, but I just wanted to say, like, I think that is one of the main causes of a lot of the tension, political tension between the United States and China right now, is that China is becoming a quote unquote threat, a competitor to the power of the United States economically. So that and if you go back in history and look at all the kind of like changes of like power and world powers, it's always a threat of another country coming up and taking that number one spot, so to speak. You know what I mean? And it creates a lot of tension and friction, and it's going to last for a long time. This quote unquote Cold War that we're in, it's going to last a long time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I could easily see that.
Yeah. Going back to, so what you're an animator, right? 3D animator?
Yeah, I do 3D animation, like character animation.
Yeah, I read that. So character animation, that sounds really interesting. And I've seen like you've worked with like brands like Marvel and like.
Yeah, I've worked on like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, like Aqua Man.
So I did a little bit of Instagram stalking on you.
Oh yeah.
and I saw you did a post. You did is it, how do you pronounce it? Previs or
Previs, yeah.
Previs. And you were posting a scene of Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yes.
And that scene was actually my favorite scene in any Marvel picture ever. And that's when Yondu gets his arrow back. And he's walking through the ship and he's killing everybody, and there's a soundtrack going on.
Yes.
That whole sequence is one of my favorite is my favorite scene of any Marvel picture ever. And you worked on that?
Yeah, it's really I did.
Wow.
It's really a cool sequence. You know, like the thing that was interesting about that was we got storyboards for it, and the storyboards were so good that they tossed them in After Effects, so it was like a sequence, and it was almost like it was animated. Like everything.
Already, yeah. Right.
Yeah, we were sitting there like, I don't know why we're here.
So what were you responsible for?
So previs is basically like it's a technique for filmmakers to kind of like basically make all the decisions before you film. So you use like physically accurate cameras within a 3D program. So it's exactly like, you know, the dimensions of the real world.
Like shot for shot. It would
Yeah,
be
so
like
we're using like a 30 millimeter where like 2 feet off the ground, you know, and you get like all the placement, all of the action. You figure out exactly what's happening, and it works especially well for stuff like Marvel movies where
Action
it's like
sequences and
really, really expensive. It's not like, oh, let's just, you know, try this out and see what happens.
Previs Green Book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how, you would know something about this, right? How he is a filmmaker himself.
Right.
Yeah, so-
Yeah. So it's, I mean, I think for that kind of stuff, it's helpful. I mean, obviously for a lot of things you don't need it, but for like Marvel movies or like Fast and Furious or things like that.
Is that also something? Is that another picture you worked on too?
I did work on that. Yeah.
Wow. Which one? There's been like 80 of them.
I worked on. I've never watched. I worked on a couple of them. I think I worked on one that's coming out.
They're coming out with another one.
Yeah, and I worked on 8. Yeah, where they're on like the ice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was it that sequence that you were working on?
That sequence, yeah.
So what in what capacity were you involved in that?
Yeah, it's also previs, and in that case, what they do with that kind of style with Fast and Furious is you basically you animate everything for like 5 minutes, and then the director comes in and like puts the cameras where he wants them.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Instead of like doing it like shot per shot. Because usually you just like, you have like a storyboard and you're like, oh, like the helicopter comes down this way, the car's going forward. But you, in that style with like the Fast and Furious movies, what they're trying to do is they're planning how they're going to drive all this stuff and how they're actually going to shoot it. And it's also kind of like, it's hard too because they can only go so fast with those cars. So you have to like make it look fast. They can only actually go like 40 miles per hour. So it's like really wide lenses, like low to the ground, like looking up, and you know, they have this much distance to travel, and like if a train is hitting the truck, you know, how far do you start back? So that like just a lot of things like that. It's actually like a lot of planning that goes into it.
So like percentage wise, like how much of it is like real action shots versus like animation or CGI or, you know, things like that?
That's a good question. I don't really know, but there's a lot of like with a lot of films. I mean, I think like you don't notice that it's that it's a special,
Because
special
the
effects.
special effects are so fucking good
Yeah,
nowadays.
it's like
you
set
can't even tell.
extensions and things like
Yeah.
that. Like you just accept it visually, like it looks
Yeah.
photoreal, so you don't know.
There's almost no more pyro done. Like explosions. That's so expensive, and just like in terms of insurance and OSHA, like you can make it look fine in CG.
So like the explosions and fire are realistic enough now
Absolutely.
where
And,
people can't even tell the difference
like
anymore.
I don't work on movies myself, but I do a lot of commercials, and I can tell you that every single car that you see in a car commercial is not real.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they look so photorealistic now.
Yeah.
Cars.
Yeah. And because I've been in the industry about 20 years.
Wow.
And when I started, they would shoot real cars, and then someone like me would paint out every imperfect reflection to make the car look perfect.
That's so time consuming, I would have to believe, right?
Just make a CG car with perfect reflections, and yeah.
I can even give an example. I just did a shoot yesterday, and it was for new earbuds coming out for a certain brand, and and basically there's a lot of effects in the shoot, and plus the the earbuds, they're still not final design. So we just basically we have
There's prototypes?
yeah, and there's just like little small details that's still getting updated. And so, when we're shooting it, we have a prototype, right? But basically we have our post supervisor on set to make sure that all the markers are there and all that stuff, because they're replacing it. So basically it's, it's all going to be fake. But it's, it's earphones, in your ear.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean,
didn't
that's
know that.
pretty standard. Like anything that is not human is perfectly replicable.
And here I was, the naive consumer, thinking everything I saw on TV was real. Fucking Voltron. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Yeah.
I didn't know that. So every car in every car commercial is CGI now. So what's the difference between CGI and animation? And like, what is it all the same, or what is it?
I mean, I think, basically you could. CGI is like it's like a catch-all for anything that's like computer generated, right? Computer generated images. But if it's moving, I mean, technically it's animation, but there's different kinds of animation. So I do like character animation, which is like keyframe, where you manipulate like a skeleton of something. Like if you think about like stop motion, like with a doll, where you like pose it, like pose by pose, That's one kind of animation, and then there's like dynamics or effects where you do like smoke or fire or like lasers or things like that. So that's another kind. There's a lot of different specialties or aspects of it.
So how would you describe character animation?
Character animation is like performance. So it's kind of like acting. It's like making something move. That could be like a human, an animal, like a little hot dog, like a little sausage or something.
So I heard
An Australian taco, yeah.
Eric told me you worked on Spider-Man, or one of the Spider-Mans.
No, I didn't. Well, I worked for Spider-Verse. I worked on the end credit sequence.
Oh,
So I didn't actually work. I wish I worked on the movie itself, but I worked on the end credit sequence for it.
Well, Spider-Verse was fucking awesome.
Yeah, it was fucking amazing. Yeah, like that really blew me away.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be like, I'm like, okay, it's gonna be for kids. It's like, it's not gonna be like, but I watched it. I was like completely drawn into
Probably
it.
the best Spider-Man.
I think it's the
Yeah.
best Spider-Man movie, hands down. And I feel like
Yeah, it's better than the movies. Yeah.
It's better than the movies, and it captured the character the best.
the styles are so great.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah.
Artistically, yeah, I mean, the animation was like perfect.
Yeah, amazing.
It was fucking incredible.
It was just like this mix mash of styles, and it just looked great.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Good story.
So you work on video games as well?
Not so
Video
much
gamer?
video games. When I first started, I worked on a few mobile games, but not so much the video games. Yeah.
So what are you working on these days?
The last thing I worked on was a short for Star Trek. I think it's going to be on CBS. They have there's a Picard show coming out,
Really?
Yeah, he's coming back. And so they have
All CG?
yeah, Picard. They've totally replicated Picard.
Like young Picard. I mean, that's what they're doing now, right? So now they're for example, the most recent Scorsese film. right? The Irishman, right? They have the young De Niro and young Pacino,
Right.
Freaking on stage with Tupac.
Yeah. Or even Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Dead characters back to life. You know, I mean, these days CG is pretty insane, and for a lot of people who don't know or are not privy to this kind of information, they would never even think twice. They would just be like, oh yeah, that's real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The whole point.
It's interesting though, because I mean, like, you do have this idea of like uncanny valley, which is like if something is 99% like human perfect, if it's 99% or like between 99 and 100, it looks weird.
Yeah.
Like it's disturbing because it's not human. Like it's slightly off. Like it looks like a corpse come to life or something like that.
Well, that just goes to show like how highly tuned our human brains and sensitivity is to these little things. Like like you're saying, like 1% off, like we can tell, like innately just tell. It's like there's something off about it. There's something weird about it.
If it's unsettling.
Yeah.
That's why the plastic surgery, we were talking about that at lunch, like all the folks have gone through these trips to Korea and come back, and they look like really grotesque.
Yeah, it's like you can't like really put your finger on it. You can't like I don't know where, but it just doesn't seem right. There's some part
they
about
look
it.
alien.
Right?
Yeah, it looks like animation from like 20 years ago, where they could like Final Fantasy from like 20 years ago, where they kind of like were there, but not quite. But this is like on a live human being. Yeah, and it's really strange. It just shows how intricate the facial expressions are,
and like our human visual cortex is
how
like,
shallow these people are.
Like how like through evolution, you can just like any like small minute change, like you wouldn't even be able to point it out.
Yeah, but
innately you just know there's something wrong.
Yeah,
it's just crazy.
And like 50%, what is it? Like 50% of your brain is like your visual cortex. So most of imagine like your brain is like a CPU. Half of the processing power is dedicated to be able to process information. So it's quite incredible.
So, Rich, where do you see the future of like animation technology going? Like because it's at a level now where you can hardly even distinguish. Like you have to have a trained eye to maybe tell the difference, right? So like in another 10 years, like how much crazier is it going to get?
Well, I mean, I think, some people, they feel like people get worried. Like, for example, there's like a lot of motion capture, especially in like films and video games where they use like actors. And even like with like the iPhone, like you can you can use your face to animate like a character,
emojis,
for example.
right, yeah.
And some people feel like, oh no, that's the end of my job or something like that. I don't see that as really like a problem. If anything, I mean, I think like technology is only going to, exponentially increase, and it's just going to make things easier. And so really it's just a matter of like injecting taste or sensibility into things, but the process is going to get easier, I think. You know what I mean?
So you don't think as the technology advances and there's more advancements in AI that, especially in your field as an animator, it would displace human labor? I
mean, maybe. Who knows? Yeah. Really? But I mean, not anytime soon. Yeah. Because I mean, even like with motion capture, it's like, they might use that on like a Batman game and they have like a realistic like run cycle, but then someone has to like come in and they add little adjustments to it to make it look like Batman. Like Batman wouldn't walk like this. It's like you have to have him like,
like the human touch.
Yeah, the human touch. Yeah, like a little bit of like the human touch, like I think machines are like only going to get better and better at doing certain things, and like maybe at one point it'll be indistinguishable, but I mean, until that point, it's like you still kind of need like a human touch. And I think like things like like you can't motion capture a dragon or like an 8 tentacles, I mean, like there's and like cartoony stuff, like something like Spider-Man, where it's really stylized, like it's a real human touch. I don't know, until there's an algorithm that like can like do that.
Yeah, I think for like standard, let's say human animation in the future, I think it's going to progress to a certain level where maybe in the past you have people specifically doing facial, you have people specifically doing body and stuff like that, but then maybe technology gets to the point where one person can do it all. And because the computer is helping you clean up everything and do everything through some sort of, I don't know, pre-programmed algorithms, right? And so that can maybe, I can foresee reduction in team members, right? Reduction,
Definitely.
right? And
Yeah.
so you don't have like for example, now is you have like hundreds of people doing, effects or animation for certain projects, right? But then maybe in the future you don't need 100, you need 10 or
Like one person can do the job of 10 people.
yeah, in a certain way. Yeah. Like, yeah, exactly.
Just from a time perspective, like they can do it faster.
But
right?
human tastes evolve, and so we're basing this on what the expectation is today. But I think the thing that evolves is what our expectation is. And Rich mentioned like stylization. So like in 5 years, 10 years, our taste will change, our preferences will change, and our expectations will change. That's why when you go back and look at the old Star Treks, they just look so primitive. And so as the technology evolves, our expectations for what we see will change, and that'll create new needs for human beings to be able to create those images or create those types of animation. So we don't really know what those requirements will be down the road too. So as the technology advances, there'll be new ways to combine them, integrate them, and then add human creativity. And then the one thing that will for sure change is what our tastes are.
Well, I think that's on one side, but I think on the other side is people actually, the creators, right? So I'm just going to use a metaphor for our industry. Let's say directors and cinematographers, right? So maybe 20 years ago, you really had to be really had to have hands-on experience on, major productions to become eventually a director. You had to be trained, very highly skilled to be a cinematographer, to be a director, et cetera, et cetera. But now, people just like pick up a phone, pick up a DSLR or whatever, and then they start shooting. And the next thing you know, they create projects that look great. And then next thing you know, they're a director, they're a cinematographer, and they call themselves that. And they may not be as technically trained as other people back in the day. So maybe that can be the same thing in terms of, let's say, post-production animation, where the access and the ability to manipulate and animate that menkan, like the entry.
It becomes like simplified and demystified, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like back in the day, like if you were to like create your own website, like you would have to hire someone to code it, and like you would have no idea how to do it. But now literally anyone who has like my 7-year-old dad can go online and like subscribe to one of those like sites and just
Squarespace or something.
Yeah, Squarespace, and just get a website made with a few clicks of the mouse, right?
Yeah. Well, the technology stack is continually being abstracted, and we're building layers on top of it. So what used to be sort of the cutting edge technology then merely just becomes part of the infrastructure, and we keep elevating above. We couldn't, like 20, 30 years ago, we couldn't have our own podcast.
Exactly.
Because we didn't have the access to distribution, publication, even like the equipment, the editing, like all that stuff. And now that becomes, incorporated into a tool, then we can apply our intelligence to, higher level functions. So in a sense, I think the one aspect, like the creativity piece, will constantly be at a premium, because like the human mind will continually think of new things. But the audience is always changing. That's the thing, right? The technology may or may not change. It probably will change, but the audience's capacity to digest new things will always be evolving, will never be static. I think, so that demand will always be pushing and, causing innovation to happen.
Yeah, no, 100%. I saw on your Instagram, Rich, like you do a lot of hand-drawn illustrations too.
Yeah. I've always kind of loved to draw, so that's something I've, it's just kind of like I do it for fun. It's not really something I do in my daily job, and I just kind of.
Well, they're fucking amazing.
Oh, thanks.
I saw. Yeah, it looked really nice.
How would you describe your style? Because I remember just first seeing some of your illustrations, like, I don't know, 15 years ago when we first met, and now seeing them, they've evolved for sure, but I can tell that they're from you. How would you describe the highly muscular style?
Yeah, I'm a guy that like I love comic books. You know what I mean? Like I grew up reading comic books, and I think that's how I learned to draw, was from that. Like I remember like probably the most important book I got was like How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, which was like
I had that book.
yeah, John Buscema. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like, you know, you draw like these like stick figures and then like construction things, and so it was like big muscles and stuff like that. That's always kind of been like you know, the foundation of what I do. And then I think recently probably one of the most inspiring artists for me is this guy named Kim Jung-ji. He's this Korean artist. And I've seen him live, and he basically will like, he'll take like an ink brush, and there'll be like a giant blank canvas, and straight from his noggin, like no construction lines, no anything, he draws these intricate scenes with like fisheye perspective where it's like all kinds of things like flying around and stuff, just like right out of his head. Like he's got like
just like freehand,
like just like
with no guides or anything.
no
like that?
guides,
Wow.
no nothing, no plan. There's no
sketch first, and then
there's no sketch. There's no
Wow.
pre-sketch. There's
and
no
they're like giant murals, basically.
He does giant murals. He does these demonstrations. He just does it live. You know.
I would love to see. Does he have stuff online?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure.
He has an Instagram.
What's his name?
Kim Jung-ji. It's KIMJUNG.
He's LA based.
No, he's I think he's South Korea, like Seoul probably. Yeah, but he tours around a lot. You know.
Oh, that's him.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah, but he's into the brush pen, and so that's been like a huge. And his whole thing is like, it's kind of like you know, touching on, I think, some of your guys' themes of like improvement and like habits and things like that. His whole thing is just kind of like, he's a doodle artist. He's not trying to like you know, like whatever comes out kind of comes out, and he just draws constantly. You know, and I think that's like a really important thing. It was like a lesson for me. Like I can be very perfectionistic, especially when it comes to drawing, and I'm like shy to like show it. I'm like, oh, this is not perfect or whatever. And so like just doing something, like it's better to draw like 30 circles than one perfect one. Like it's better to just do something more, like all the time. Like
Just do something.
do something. Yeah, like the more you do it, like the better you're gonna get. Like that's actually how you get better. Not doing something perfectly. It's just doing it like more. You know what I mean?
100% agree.
You should listen to our episode. We have an episode about the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I don't know if you read it, but it's very much along those lines in terms of just do something, you know what I mean? And don't worry about like the criticisms or your own kind of like internal like roadblocks you would put in front of yourself. And just basically doing something is a form of progression. Like anything, just do something, right? That's better than standing still, right? And just by the mere fact of doing something, you are progressing, and in turn you are succeeding. You know, it's a victory. You know, they're small victories, but you just keep doing something instead of being stagnant, and that is its own reward. So you keep feeding back that way.
You got to make more mistakes. Like make the mistakes early and fast, and make more of them. And I think that's the thing. That's the thing I realized too. Like with animation, like a lot of it is just constantly revising and constantly like looking at things and like, is this working? I don't know. Is this working? Like, and you're always refining. And sometimes you go forward a bunch, and you're like, oh, this feels good. And then you might realize like, you know what? There's something fundamentally wrong here, and maybe I have to go back, you know, like several steps, and it hurts because you're like, oh, now I have to like change the whole position of where the dragon's landing. Well, you know, I have to like erase all this stuff.
Have you ever has this ever happened to you where you've created something and it's, you know, pretty mature in terms of your progress? Let's say it's a character animation. You've done a whole, let's say, I don't know, 10-second animation. The design, everything's already done. And all of a sudden your file goes corrupt and down the drain, and you have to start from scratch again.
Oh, all the time.
And then does it get better by going back and doing it all over again?
Every time.
Right?
Every time. Yeah. The thing with doing 3D animation, like I work in this program, Maya, which, you know, nobody loves Maya. Just kind of like the standard that what people use. And, you know, there's certain things you can do like autosave or things like that. Sometimes it's not an option though. And like you could do all this stuff where you add like this little overlap on like some fingers, and you're like, oh, I got this arc really nice and all this stuff. And then like, maybe you just like clicks a few things like a little too fast, and like you see like a spinning wheel, and then
You're
it's like, you for a second you're in denial and you're like, maybe if I just go like take a whiz and I come back, like it's gonna be fine. And then you get to a point where you're like, this is.
It's like 2 days later, it's still spinning.
Like this is real. This is real.
What would Voltron do? Yeah, you know. and then you're forced to like start over, and you like part of you is like, oh, how am I gonna get that back? But actually, almost inevitably, like every time you do it again. Like a lot of you've already walked that path, and then you do it again, and sometimes, and usually, it's even better.
And you get to that point quicker, right? But you're also improving based off of what you've learned already.
Yes.
Right. So that goes back to what you're saying.
Because like you've already mapped out like a lot of the steps, like in the first place, doing it in the first draft kind of thing. Yeah. Like I would have to think like with professions like yours and like being like an animator, an illustrator, a filmmaker. These are more artistic endeavors, right? And I think with anything artistic, you're attached. You're much more personally attached to your work than a normal job. I think that's less artistic, right?
That's true. Although I think the biggest lesson I learned, moving to LA, working in the industry, working as a commercial artist, was like being able to. You still care about what you're doing, but you kind of have to not be so attached to it because it's not your show. This is someone else. Like you're working on a commercial and it's like, it's like some like cat food commercial. And like, I think the cat should jump in like this on the litter pan and take a poop. And then like, the director's like, no, this is how it is. And you're like, well, it looks stupid, but what, Wait,
like, hold on. Are you telling me the cats in those commercials are also CGI? Are you telling me this? No, do not shatter my world right now. Are you serious?
No, I was just making like a random,
Justin, one day
my entire world
you're
gonna be
shattered. You're gonna be CGI on this show.
Yeah.
But Rich, you mentioned a couple of things that were interesting to me, and kind of, I guess, circling back one or two steps. So Justin mentioned, are you attached to your work a little bit more because it's artistic? And I almost feel like in a way you can't be, to your point, because these artistic projects now are so complex. Marvel is the cutting edge of like human technology and innovation. It's not like, 500 years ago where you could carve a piece of marble into and shape it. Now it's an enterprise. It's like thousands of people coming together. You play that particular role. So you take pride in that piece of what you've done, but at the same time, you don't own the entire thing. And so you can't necessarily be as attached. But in let's say in a traditionally non-artistic endeavor, like, I don't know, accounting or tax law or, other like corporate types of businesses, people do take pride in what they do, and they do feel a lot of ownership in whatever it is you do. If you're a sales guy, you might strive to make the perfect sales pitch every time you meet a customer,
or hitting certain numbers.
Yeah, exactly. If you're like, in tax law, like you really strive to make the best business decision. So it's interesting that we sometimes try to put technology or process on one side and then arts on the other side, when the intersection of it really is this attention to detail and taking pride in the ownership of whatever you're creating, whether or not the ultimate output is something for entertainment or something that's that's business oriented. And I think Steve Jobs talked a lot about this, right? Where engineers are actually more creative than you think, and artists are much more disciplined than you would imagine.
Well, I would consider engineering an artistic venture. Mm-hmm. It really is, right? Mm-hmm. Like trying to design, like let's go back to like the design of the iPhone, right? That's an artistic.
You guys
endeavor.
use iPhones? Oh, okay. Anyways.
No, I use Android.
Okay.
I like Huawei.
I got an Oppo.
No, but that to me is an artistic venture. I mean, that takes a lot of creativity, and not just the designing of the iPhone,
problem
but the
solving.
Yeah,
problem solving is a form of creativity.
Yeah. Agreed.
And anything you do requires problem solving.
Yeah. So I guess going back to what you were saying, like, I guess it doesn't really matter if it's an artistic venture or not, because at the end of the day, whatever you're doing, if you take ownership in your work, you're attaching your name to that body of work. Right. So even if you're just contributing a small part of the entirety of the whole thing, your name is attached to that part, right? And will forever be attached to that part. And I think that's just goes back to like accountability and ownership, things we've talked about in the past. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think a big thing too with like commercial art, working with a team and something that's like a really salient sort of thing for our industry is like ego. And like your traditional idea of like an artist is like someone who's like, it's all about me, it's about my expression. And like I said, like with that sequence I worked on, it's like I was just like a really small part of that. You know what I mean? There was like really good storyboards, there's really good direction, there's really good models, everything was good. I just like did my little thing that was a part of it. It was good because everything was good. And it's more important to care about kind of like what is the best for like not caring so much like, oh, this is my idea, this is how it should be, I'm good at this. It's more like, what does everyone think? What is the best thing? What does the director want? And I think like that's something that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing to remember about film and TV is, there's a director at the top. There's definitely a hierarchy, and we artists we're artisans, and you have to remember the difference between being an artist and an artisan. So artisans care more about their craft. So we hone our craft perfectly, and we're very proud of the product we make. But we're not artists in which we are imparting our specific vision. We're imparting our craft. So that's the difference.
Well, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, when I saw Kim Jung-gi, that artist I talked about, he and this, I think he's Taiwanese, he's a sculptor named Simon Lee. He does these really cool actual like clay sculptures, and he's worked on like a bunch of films and things like that. And he's unusual because he's a traditional, uses traditional media. And someone in the audience at this thing, it was really cool. Like he was sculpting something, and then Kim Jung-gi was drawing it, and they were going like back and forth. It was like a jam, they called it.
Like freestyle.
Yeah, it was like
sounds awesome.
Yeah, they were like freestyling shit. They drew like this weird. It was like this weird like dragon monster. And there's these things jumping on it, and at the end of it, like someone was asking Simon a question. They're like, "Oh, like what'd you think about like because you worked on Star Trek? What did you think about like the designs you did for that? Like I was working on that." And he's like honestly, he's like, the only thing I cared about was getting paid on time. He's like, what I care about is like my own stuff that I do. You know what I mean? Like my work is something different. Like when I'm getting paid, I'm there to do a job, and I'm there to fulfill like a need within this to get it like done, and then like there's stuff that you do like that it doesn't like there's no judgment, there's no need to like prove anything. It's just like you just do it because you want to do it. You know what I mean? And like that's like what my drawings are. Like I just do that because it like I enjoy it. You know what I mean? And like I don't want to hear what anyone like I'm not gonna like ask someone like what they think about it. You know what I mean? Like I just like this is me. This is what I want to do. But there's a big difference between those things.
Just you even be able to do that though, is really great, because there are a lot of artists out there that may not be able to do that because they maybe, I don't know, like like for example, sometimes I would struggle working in the commercial industry, where I'm trying to like put myself into it, but at the same time I know that I'm serving my role for a client, right? Yes. But like, I'm doing something, I could be like, I don't give a fuck what you think. Like, this is what I think, this is what I'm doing, but it doesn't work that way, Of course, that's in the commercial way, but then like, that also could leak into my own personal stuff, because it's like, okay, so if I'm working on something, myself, then also I'm like, well, is it good? Or is it like, I don't know, like, check it out, like read my script, check out my short film. Like, did you get anything out of it? You know what I mean? Because especially for our medium, it's not like, maybe even more for me, because like I can't draw. I'm not able to just like do things for myself. Like I need a team of people to create something together, right? So I guess it's like, it's this working together, this collaboration that I do care about what other people think, and in order
it matters.
Yeah,
it really matters. Like the thing with animation too, like I remember a teacher told me this. It's like, if you show your grandma like an animation, like if she says like, I don't get it, what's happening, then you failed. Like people should like animation is like about communicating something clearly.
Clearly.
It's about people understanding what you're trying to get across, you know. Whereas I think like if you're you know, like a fine artist or something like that, and you're doing like some kind of weird paint, you know, it's like it's like about your interior world. It's a different thing than like communicating something clearly. It's a really big it's a really big difference.
Yeah, depends on your medium, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you talked a little bit around this, excuse me, and this notion of this traditional notion of individual ego and genius, like the Beethoven, someone who, even despite his deafness, was able to create these incredible pieces of music that have survived for hundreds of years, and literally like single-handedly, right? Like this one unique, overpowering genius created that, and that's this very significant monument in human history. And at the same time, you have, I don't know, the Statue of Liberty, or you have, you know, the Great Wall, you know, and some of the Marvel movies where literally the pyramids, where the collective genius of humans came together to produce something that was also monumental. And so you have both. And I think some people, there's some individuals that have that interior view and that create great things and then inspire. And at the same time, we build these things that take the collective genius and the collective grit and perseverance of hundreds, if not thousands of people. And there is that constant tension between the two. And, you know, both of them have kind of moved humanity forward. But both of them exist, you know, and, you know, I think the interesting thing is like to see your sort of art evolve and you support some of these larger projects. Have you thought about, you know, what it would look like if you were to be the kind of the artist in it? Right. I think you can be an artisan and an artist sort of at the same time, just at different times. But like, what does that look like for you? Have you thought about doing your own films or doing your own animations and then having people support you?
Yeah, I guess I've thought about it. I mean, you know, like, to be honest, sometimes I do get the opportunity to kind of like inject myself into what I do, you know. So I think I feel pretty fortunate for that, and I enjoy what I do. And I think, you know, like I could definitely see myself, you know, kind of making something of my own. Like I get ideas for things and stuff like that. It is hard though, because like honestly, it's like, you know, doing this job can be very demanding, which seems kind of like counterintuitive, because I'll tell people what I do, and like normally they're like, their reaction is like, oh, you know, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
They're like, oh,
That's a very common,
wow.
yeah.
Like, oh, like almost like in a condescending, like, oh, like you know, you don't really work. Like that's fun.
Oh, really?
The
You
physics.
get that kind of reaction, though?
I do. I think people, or in a positive way, they're like, oh, that's fun, you know. But like the physical reality of working on a computer, like 10 days or 10 hours a day, or like 8 hours a day, like it beats you up. And I see a lot of people get run down really hard. I mean, you're sitting, you're clicking on stuff, you're staring at a monitor, you're not moving around, and it can be stressful. There's a lot of demands on you. And so, you know, trying to create balance in your life, it's like when I get home, it's like, do I want to like work on a short film? Do I want to animate? It's like, no, I'm going to work out. Like I want to
You want to just like be away from any
I want
screen.
to chill.
Right?
Yeah, I want to chill, you know? Like I have other hobbies. It's
tough, yeah.
it's tough, you know.
Is something like carpal tunnel syndrome a common thing that occurs in your field?
Hell yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, a lot of people. I remember actually I had like a sports injury a while back, and I went to like a physical therapist's office, and they said like a lot of the patients they get are people that do computer work. And I had like one friend in particular who's I mean, this is a whole other, this guy's a funny guy. He's a Mormon who's lived in China, and he's like the only person I'd practice Mandarin with for many years. But this guy's a concept artist, and he developed this problem in his arm. I think it was carpal tunnel, or it was some like nerve major nerve in his arm. He would rest his elbow on the edge of a table when he was drawing, and it fucked that nerve up, and he literally would lose ability to like move his hand. And I remember he told me this story one time. He was going over to like the Warner Brothers lot or something, like, yeah, come by, like do some sketches. We want to see how you work. And he was driving over, and as he was driving over, his hand like froze up, like he couldn't move his you know, a lot of people like get like they wear all kinds of like guards and things like that. I bought a standing desk because I remember I had like 1 month. It was actually right when I really started getting busy, and I was like, you know, working a lot more. And there's like a month where I worked 7 days a week for the whole month. And then I was commuting from like the eastern side of LA to the western side. And so I was driving like over an hour each way. So I was like sitting for probably like 13 hours a day or something like that. And I developed this like really bad like lower back problem. So there's a lot of things, you know, like that you kind of
Well, so do you have to like constantly tell yourself like to take breaks and like get up and like move around? Is that
so I have a standing desk, I have like a mat, and then I try to just like I'll just walk I'll just walk outside and go somewhere, get a coffee, or just take breaks. Some people don't though.
Well, you know, it's actually interesting. There's a time when I was editing and for long hours, and I actually downloaded something called it's a Pomodoro technique. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what it is like an app that I downloaded. That the Pomodoro technique is basically it's like it start off with like 30 to 45 minutes of pure work, and then it'll click like ding, and then you have to get up for 5 minutes. And then just remind you, like, get up 5 minutes. And then I go back down, and then it's like another 30 minutes, and then 5 minutes again, ding. And then next thing you know, it's 15 minutes, ding. You know, so it times it out for a whole day to make you productive and make sure that you're constantly moving and stretching.
I'm constantly ignoring my Apple Watch. Like, it tells me to get up and walk around every hour, and I'm like, fuck off.
fuck off?
It's just telling me to get up right now.
Oh, is it?
It's like, breathe. No, I'm not breathing.
But Claudia, let me ask you though, why is that? Is it just because you want to get your shit done, or is it like, what is it that makes you tell it to fuck off? You know?
I think I mean there's different kinds of workers, and you know, one isn't more productive than the other. I just happen to be the kind who likes to sit and finish things as fast as possible. But I've also learned the lesson that work begets more work if you work in that fashion. So I developed some pretty bad back problems and like neck problems. I also wear like stuff, you know, gear when I work, so it's not recommended.
Yeah. Actually, I do have a question now that I'm thinking about it with your profession. I mean, do you ever get hit up by certain projects where the timeline, the delivery date is just so ridiculous? So you literally have to do all-nighters to get it out. I mean, do you get those kind of projects?
Try not to.
Yeah, like what I'm trying to say is like, how do you deal with that?
You start off accepting them, and you learn very quickly that you don't have to, that there's enough work out there, especially in Los Angeles, where you know the studios to avoid. Like, I know of a studio where like literally a guy died working he actually died.
Yeah.
Like working too much.
That happens a lot in China, actually.
I can believe that.
And the news, I mean, it's in the film industry. I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but especially for production designers. So every year, a few production designers die on set because they're working nonstop.
Is that due to the culture of the studios, the demands, or is that on an individual basis? Like,
I think it really comes down to the studios and the way they're run, you know, because it doesn't have to be like that. A lot of studios, a lot of like producers, they have a hard time standing up to clients, and they don't have the wherewithal or the whatever to kind of like say like, that's not doable, or this is how long it's going to take, you know what I mean? And I think it's like a systemic problem maybe it's gotten a little better, but it got really bad as far as like visual effects, where it's like a race to the bottom, where they try to underbid other studios. You know, even a studio I worked for recently, I learned they would do like previs. They'd say like, hey, if we do we'll give you previs for free if you choose us to do the final shots. Things like that, you know what I mean? Like it's very competitive, and like,
Yeah.
I think that a huge problem too with it is that there are people at the top who are not business savvy, who don't understand kind of like the rudiments of business, that are making these decisions, and you really get backed into a corner, you know what I mean? And you know, shit rolls downhill.
Yeah.
It rolls down the shit, and like people get thrown under the bus, and like artists, like some people, I mean, I've been in situations where I've definitely like, I remember one studio, it was I went there in the morning and I worked till like 5 a.m. and then I came in the next day, and I remember just told, like, I'm charging you for 2 days, like I was here 2 days. That was two work days full time.
Just straight. That's it.
Yeah, straight. And some people are shy about it too. You know, about like asking for like.
Well, I think it's maybe not even shy. It's insecurity, because they feel like, well, if I say something, then they're just gonna hire somebody else.
Yeah, they feel like they're
Yes.
replaceable because the
Yeah.
competition is so fierce.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a huge problem. People are afraid to, you know, ask for like a good day rate or good money, and afraid to like say like, hey, I want overtime or things like that, you know.
Yeah, a lot of people, especially in the U.S., I think it's taboo to talk about money, and especially for artists. So, like, whenever I go to a studio, like a new studio where there's new people, I'm like, hey, what are you making? What are you making? And some people will be really shy about saying it. So I'll just be like, I make X amount for, you know, this number of hours, like FYI. So if you're not making that, you need to sort that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is like taboo, right? It's like it's almost like asking someone like, "Oh, who are you voting for?" It's
Yeah.
like this taboo subject like no one can talk about.
It's
like,
tacky,
you know, it's like
it's tacky, but you know, that's how you collude.
That's a little different here in China, though.
yeah, China here, I think it's more practical. People are just have a more practical mindset. So like how much you're getting paid and what rates you're charging for this is all part of the job. It's all part of, they know it's like this is what you consider when you're making your decisions, right? Like
It's very transparent here.
Yeah.
I always remember people asking how much money I made point blank.
Yeah.
Like,
And you're like, wait, what?
你赚多少钱? And it's like, excuse me?
It's like how dare you?
Yes, exactly.
So direct,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
But I think going back to what we were just talking about, I think a lot of it is, you know, like this innate need for a lot of people to want to please, right? And come through for their clients, like quote unquote come through. So they feel like they have to bend over backwards to meet every demand, no matter how unrealistic some of the demands might be, right? And they just want to do it. Like I know this from, you know, I was in the apparel manufacturing business for a while, right? So in any sort of position where you're kind of like an agent in the middle, right? You don't have overall authority because you're not the client, right?
Right.
But you're not the bottom guy because you're not the factory either. So you're the agent kind of in between. That's what I was doing. You're stuck in the middle, right? And you have clients asking, you know, we worked for, you know, stores like Walmart, you know, Costco, the biggest wholesalers in the States. And because they are so big, they are so powerful, and they are buying so many things, they have a lot of power, right? And they know that. And they are not shy at all to use that power and use that leverage over you when it comes to cost cutting, when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to deadlines, quality control, all these things. They throw their entire weight on you, and you have to come through. Otherwise, they pull the order, you're stuck with a huge debt, liabilities, all these things. So then it creates this culture of like, it becomes like people are like working crazy hours, doing the impossible just to try to make ends meet. And the kind of routine and repetition of that definitely takes its toll. Yeah. And that comes with any power of like when there's entity of like high leverage, high power, like a studio, right? Like a network, where there's a big retailer like, you know, Walmart, right? And you have a bunch of people in different companies in between trying to fulfill certain roles in that pipeline.
Yeah.
All that weight, like you said, shit rolls downhill, right?
Yeah.
Like all that weight comes down,
Yeah.
and everyone under them in that totem pole feels the weight of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like the product changes. Every film or every commercial is different. So it's not like a corporation where, you know, I'm producing certain technology products or I'm producing certain industrial gear. So I have a relatively fixed workforce and an organizational structure and pay structure because I need this person to be able to contribute for me for every quarter, every year. And you know, Justin, you mentioned the studios being these massive sort of, you know, very powerful entities. And so they have to basically create like almost like a company's worth of people to produce something. But then for every film, it's going to be like a different organizational structure. So it's always kind of evolving and there's not consistency. So I guess that's like, I don't know much about the entertainment industry, but I suppose that's why you need to have like unions and you need to have certain collectives to be able to protect the rights of these things that are quickly formed and then quickly dissipated, you know,
To balance the power, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean,
to
it's all
balance
about
the
leverage.
power,
At the end of
yeah.
the day, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what dynamic you're involved in, it's all about leverage, right? Everyone's going to use leverage to their own advantage.
Is there a group of, I guess, like people who work in the animation industry where they kind of band together or collude, as you would say?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely like unions and there's like guilds, things like that.
Yeah, but wasn't there like last year a huge, or maybe even this year, early this year, a huge backlash from animators for video game industry where they kind of
Yeah,
went nuts?
I don't know. I mean, the thing that's funny is when I started in the industry, a lot of people said, you know, like if you want like a more stable sort of path, you know, like choose video games because the cycle is longer. Like there's nothing more complex than making a video game. Like there's so much that goes into it because it's interactive, because it's 3-dimensional. It's not like a film where it's like, oh, behind here is like cardboard and we're only filming this here, not over there. You know, it's like you see everything and everything has to like work.
Like
and
you have to literally create a world,
you're
a universe.
literally
in a
creating
video
it
game.
and it's interactive
Yeah.
and like all this shit. And then there's like story and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, like that's what people told me. But like, I think that video games seems like the worst.
No,
the
they said it's
worst.
so unhealthy.
It's so unhealthy. I mean,
Why did they say that?
I think like the perception was that it was a more stable career and that it was a healthy industry, but I don't, as an animator, I mean, like it's not like the pay is lower. A lot of these studios, it's the same thing with like films where it's this tentpole sort of like ideology or business model where it's like we put everything into this giant thing. And if it's not a hit, if it's not an unequivocal hit, then you know, it's a failure. And people like studios shut down all the time. And because you've been at a place for a long time, you're not plugged into anything else. And so then you're like left high and dry and the pay is lower on top of it. So actually for us, it's like, I love being a freelancer. Like I would never want to be full-time somewhere. Never. Like I've gotten like offers like, hey, you want to like be full-time here? And I'm like, no, I really don't.
Because you have more freedom as a freelancer.
You have more freedom. I think you end up making more money. If you keep busy as a freelancer, you're making more. You're making
Definitely.
more than if you're full-time, at least as an artist. I think like in certain regards, like in certain, like if you're like higher level, like you have some sort of like managing aspect, or you're like a lead or something like that, and you get hired full time, you could probably make the same or a little more. But in a lot of situations, it's like, you know, like if you worked at like Disney or DreamWorks and you're like a lead animator, they make what I make.
Oh, really?
Only they have like more responsibility.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so
It's because they have so your pay is going to be lower in house because is stability. I mean, you're guaranteed a certain salary, and that's it, right? You get you lower salary compared to freelance, because like as per hour, as a freelancer, you're definitely going to make more because you're not guaranteed. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So I mean, in any industry, in the entertainment industry, as a freelancer, whether you're a freelance animator, director, or whatever, you're going to get paid more than an in-house.
But the thing is, like, for example, in California, it's a work at will state, which means you could get laid off from your full-time job for any reason anyway.
Really?
So it's very illusory, this whole notion of stability. And again, like he said, studios close down all the time. So you are actually a better artist if you're freelance most of the times, because when you're in a full-time job, you know, sometimes you come in, you're hungover, you kind of like phone it in, and you're just like on Facebook all day. You never do that when you're freelance. Every day is your first day of school.
Yeah, I think like my favorite analogy for being a freelancer versus being full-time, it's kind of like it's like dating versus being in a relationship. You know, like when you're a freelancer, like you're always
Dating.
You have to be on your best behavior. Like your game has to be tight.
Yeah.
Like
You gotta stay in shape constantly.
Yeah, you
can't
gotta.
let
You're
go.
like
Always go
you're
to the
like
gym.
fighting weight. You know, like you're like
Manscape.
yeah, you're manscaped. Your balls are like
Clean.
they're fucking immaculate. Like you're ready. You're ready to go in.
Smooth
Yeah.
like eggs.
Smooth like eggs. Yeah, you're ready for
Always gotta
action.
keep a condom in your wallet. You know what I mean? It's like
Got breath mints. Tic Tacs. Yeah, no, you have something to prove, and like bringing a freelancer, like the expectation is like you're gonna kill it. Like we're paying you good money.
Yep.
Like you better bring it. Like you better crush this. You know, it's not like no. You know, but I think both have their advantages, disadvantages. I mean, I think the thing like as far as being a freelancer that like is not the best is like it does feel like you're always proving yourself. You know what I mean? And there's no sense of like climbing, you know, where it's like, you know, you did such a good job on this. Like we really noticed that. Like we want you to like
Get a raise.
Yeah. Actually, this last job I had, the guy, I actually met him when I first went to school after leaving Shanghai. And I never took any of his classes or anything like that, but I knew the guy, and he was my supervisor on this job. And they brought me in. I actually got hired through this agency, and I was working for this company on this short film. And he came up to me afterwards, and he's like, you know, like, we really appreciate what you did here. Like, you really inspired a lot of the younger animators and, like, all this stuff. And he said all these things that it was like so nice to hear something like that. You know, like, you never really get that being a freelance. It's kind of, you're like a mercenary. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, it's like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like
a
you know,
one night stand over and over
it's like,
again.
yeah, it's like a
right?
one night stand. It's like you, like when you wake up, you leave, you know, like you don't like cuddle
It's
in the
not-
morning.
It's not
yeah, there's
not
no
the worst
cuddling.
position to be in, though. It's not the worst
It's
position
like
to
a
be
really
in.
hot one
But
night
do you
stand.
have? But
you
do you
know,
have?
like it's like Tay Diggs, and then you're out.
But do you have like a rating system? Like, how do they? Is it word of mouth? Like, how do they know?
Well,
Like-
what you're saying right now is what I wanted to bring up, because I think it could be dangerous if you just, because we're talking about freelance as if it's like the way to go, right? But it's actually not for everybody, right?
No, it isn't.
That's the thing.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
No, it really isn't. And I think, like I said, you know, like I'm not trying to say like, you know, it's not for everybody. And some people have like a really good setup, being full time. Like I have a friend, I hadn't seen him in like 4 years or something like that. He had like a kid. Like I didn't see him in a while. He's an editor. He does like film trailers, and he works at like the biggest film trailer house in LA. He's like full time there, and he makes more money than when he was freelance, you know. And that's what he wants to do. He cuts film trailers. He does it all the time, and he has a family. So it's like, why would he want to like, you know, like it just doesn't make sense for him to be freelance.
Yeah,
Like it's
'cause
not.
I believe being a freelancer, you need to have a certain type of skill set, let alone ability. Like your actual technical or creative ability needs to be at a certain level in order to keep this freelance status, right? Because if you're not that good, no one's gonna hire you.
Well,
Right.
in Los Angeles, everyone's good. I mean, everyone is good. So the thing that you bring as a freelancer is a soft skill. You know, if you're like have a little, you know, a way with people or
Social
like
skills
clients
or-
or like a really loud laugh.
Yeah, I think, you know, yeah, that's the thing too, is like you're selling yourself a little bit, you know, like because like a lot of people can do the job, and a really important thing is being easy to work with and like fun to work with, because you know otherwise, because yeah, like you know, if someone is absolutely amazing and they're a total dick to work with, and I got someone that's like really good, but like maybe not like amazing and awesome to work with, guess who I'm picking? Like, I'd rather work with someone that like takes criticism well, you know, makes a joke when things are rough, you know, like someone like that, you know, it's like because it is a team effort.
Yeah.
Well,
you know?
I would have to believe that in your job, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but a big part of it is not only just the technical know-how and skill, but like you said, it's that human-to-human communication. I'm sure communication is a huge part on what you do, because they have to communicate the ideas to you. They have to communicate what they want, right? Like, and you have to communicate back. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of personal interaction.
It's really critical. Yeah, and and actually it's something like I always considered myself a good communicator, but I think like I've actually had to kind of pay a lot more attention to that, and you know, put more effort into like setting expectations with people, like, hey, you know, like when did you want to see this, and like how far along, you know, did you want this to be, and like, you know, is this what you had in mind, you know, like a lot of like little things like that, like constantly, you know,
Being on, I've always said this, and how you can testify to this, like whenever I work with people, right, in any sort of capacity, but especially like in a business capacity or whatever, being on the same page with your partners in terms of expectations makes all the difference, because that is the thing that's going to carry you through when shit hits the fan, when you come across rough patches, and over the long term, is knowing that you set off with the same expectations in mind as to what the final goals are, like where that end result is going to land. And if you have the same expectations, that will carry you through a lot of challenges. The problems arise when you start on a venture or the new project with someone, or even a business with someone. And in the beginning, everyone's optimistic, everyone's excited, things are good, things are on the up and up, right? So
blue sky.
Exactly. So everyone's happy, and you're communicating, and you think you're all on the same page, blah, blah, blah. But there are these little differences in terms of, you find out later as the relationship grows, as the project grows, you find out, oh, you were expecting that? Oh, no, I saw it as this. And maybe in the beginning, they're kind of like trivial things that you can kind of just brush off. But as the stakes get higher and higher, and as the challenges get harder and harder, those differences accumulate, and they can become the breaking point in terms of any healthy relationship that you have. Are those differences in expectations? So I love what you said about expectations. I think I've always valued that as having clear communication of expectations from the get-go, of where we're going, where we're heading, what we all expecting
and
to
the
achieve. And
expectations change over time.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to realign and recalibrate.
Exactly.
Because the project, the direction, everything is always evolving. And it's easy you could start off on the same page, and it's easy to get to a point where you grow apart. And then all of a sudden one day you wake up and you're like, wait a minute, like, and that's when the disagreements sort of happen. So you actually have to kind of constantly check in.
Exactly.
But that brings great ideas. And I think it's a humble attitude, which it might be difficult. I don't know. Like in this animation industry, people are like really good. It's easy probably to have a little bit of an ego and stuff like that. But like, you know, I think as a freelancer, you have to be really humble, because you're going in, you know, scratch like to every job, and you have to reset those expectations of what's happening because it's a new client, and you have to ask these really rudimentary questions. You might think, I've already done 1,000 projects, but I actually have to go in and be like, hey, like, what are you expecting? When do you want these things? So I think the humility is really probably something that, you know, that you have to be good at.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I mean, because like, yeah, people with egos, yeah, it's like, you know, it just doesn't fly. Like, most people are really cool in the industry, really cool, like really nice people, everyone's talented, but like, yeah, there's always some bad apples, you know.
Some diva.
Well, there's, when someone's a jerk, it just, it makes it bad for everybody. Like, I don't want to name any names. I worked on that Fast and Furious movie, and that was like one of the worst experiences I've ever had.
Why?
Like, it was the supervisor. Like, if you look at organizations, like, if you look at like the top, that really influences the whole atmosphere. It informs everything all the way down, how people perceive everything, how things act, how everything works. And this guy was just like, he was just kind of a jerk. He was, if you talk to him one-on-one, he was a cool guy. Like, he liked to surf. He was from like London. He moved there and he's like, yeah, I like surfing, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, that's cool. He was cool. But then like working, he would show up late to work. And we'd have like nothing to do all week. Like we'd be sitting around like working, like looking at each other, like what's going on here? And then Friday would come and he'd be like, all right, guys, like we might have to work this weekend, and he literally would like point at everyone. He's like, you, can you, it's like, and people would be all like embarrassed, like, I can't work this weekend. And he's like, he's like, I'm busy, and it's like, you make me, it was like,
It was like an interrogation.
yeah, it was like an interrogation. It was like, we've been sitting here all week.
Yeah, we could have
Like,
been doing
I'm
this.
ready to work. Like I came here to, it's, at the end of the day, I think the way you treat people, like the example you set, all of these things, matter a lot, and if you're a jerk, like word gets around the campfire, my friend. It's not a big industry.
Yeah. And that goes back to what Eric was saying about freelance. Is there a rating system? No, but there's word of mouth, right? There's a word of mouth. It's not just about your portfolio. It's, what people say about you. And yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people also get, I don't want to say spoiled, but it's not spoiled. It's like they get
Entitled.
It's not even entitled, but they learn early on because they see all these truly great artists and designers and these people who are at the top of their field. And notoriously, we hear all these stories. A lot of them are divas, have huge egos, might be not the best personality types, but they're so good at what they do. You put up with it, because there's a demand behind what they do. And then, so you have all these other, people coming up who are nowhere near the class and quality and talent of these people, but they have the same kind of attitudes and egos, and they feel like they have to be this diva or they have to be this asshole, and they feel like they have to fit a certain archetype, right? To like to be that person, right? Because they see like their role models like that, so the most annoying thing is when a person doesn't have that talent or doesn't have those skills, but they still have like those problematic attitudes, and they're a diva and they have these huge egos. That's when it's just.
Fortunately, there's so many artists in LA that it is kind of a perfect marketplace, and the market sorts out those fools.
Exactly. That's great.
Except for what's his name, Hauser.
Oh, that fucking bipolar guy.
There's literally a guy.
Who's bipolar.
There's literally a guy who I think he got blackballed so many times. He changed his name.
Wow.
He changed his name to some weird like Hauser.
Why? Like, what was he? Why was he so bad?
He's like Howie Lamb.
I
It's
think
Howie all along.
I don't know him. I don't know. Like, you better tell this story.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's just one of those guys who, he might have fetal alcohol syndrome, or he smoked too much weed, so he doesn't get enough like deep sleep. But there's something wrong with there's something actually chemically wrong with his brain, and he'll just like lash out and yell at people. I had a really terrible experience with him a while ago, and then I realized that everyone who's worked with him has had this experience. And yeah, I think there's just something. There's something chemically.
Is he talented?
Wrong. No, I had to open one of his files, and like in the horror flick when you go to the regular guy's house and then you open the closet door and there's this like blood and like strings and paint, like that was what it was like looking at his file.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But then you saw him again, and he gave you a big hug. He's like, Claudia, and you're like, his name was Hauser. Suddenly his name was Hauser.
Hey. Oh, yeah.
Different name, different person.
It's one of his 4 split personalities. Hi, my name is.
Oh, my name's Hauser.
My name is Simon.
My name's Simon.
You're like, I just had coffee with you yesterday. You were not called Hauser.
You were called
didn't have an
John.
accent.
Your name was John.
Yeah, it's like you just poured a bucket of blood on my head yesterday. Don't you remember?
What the fuck are you talking about, man?
So, is it as a freelancer in your field, is it common to get repeat customers, clients?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you definitely build relationships, and there's certain studios you just like working with. Obviously.
So going back to that Instagram post where you were you were working on the Guardians of the Galaxy Vol.2.
Yeah.
I think it was that post. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were saying like that was like one of the most like the funnest projects you had been on or something like that.
It was pretty fun. Yeah, I mean,
what was so fun about it?
It was something that was fun about it was we were working on the Disney lot, so being there itself was cool. We were working in an old, it was an animation building from like the 30s or something. It was like a Disney animation building, So it was cool being there, and then like the Marvel office itself.
So the whole experience was just.
Yeah, it was cool. They had there was like a Star Wars day. They were showing like the last Star Wars movie they came. There was just a lot of like cool things about. I mean, it's it's cool being on like a movie lot, and like having the full kind of Hollywood thing. It's fun. It's fun. And then like honestly, like mostly what I do is character animation, and I do previs like some of the time. It's like a slightly different skill set. And then with that team, they were like all of like the cream of the crop previs artists. Like it was kind of like they picked the best
all-star team.
They picked an all-star team, and like I didn't like always do that stuff, and they brought me in, so I was like I was in the all-star team for a second, So it was cool to like work with those guys on this thing, and then like James, like he wasn't there physically, but he would like look at all the stuff, and James Gunn, the director, he would like comment on things and stuff. So I mean, it was
cool.
It was really cool. Yeah, it was fun. I definitely like. I work myself mostly in commercials, and then like sometimes I work in films. You know what I mean? And it's nice to like work on stuff like films where people like care about it and pay attention to it and watch it. Like working for commercials, like the studios, like they got better snacks, they got better bathrooms with like moisturizers in it and things like that. You know what I mean? Like it's nice, but it's cool to work on stuff like that now and then. Like
where there's a legacy to it. There's a culture behind it, like something like Star Wars, right?
I think
it's
it
like
builds,
there's a whole culture behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean you're contributing to like this culture and this thing. I think it like builds your cachet a little bit. Like if you think about like a video game where you do different like quests or things like that, and you build different like levels, I think that builds like your reputation a little more. You know what I mean? Like it's a good experience.
A little stat bonus.
So tell us when you do like a really cool film and it comes out and you're watching it with Claudia or some of your friends, do you pause the scenes that you've worked on? Like how many times do you pause, and like how many times do you make them watch it?
Like see that animation that was
like
me.
over and
that
over.
No, I've pointed it out a few times, but like I don't subject people to it. Yeah.
And so I have a follow-up question back to the whole freelance thing. So, we were talking about the pluses and minuses of being a freelancer, and for the listeners out there that are freelancers or are considering becoming freelancers, I mean, from your experience so far, what would be some, I don't know, anecdotes or recommendations or suggestions or tips that you can give?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my personal experience, like being a freelancer was not something I chose to do. When I was here in Shanghai, I didn't really have a career. Like I came here, I was like teaching English. I did like real estate for a year. I was like doing like random like video production things, like doing some like kind of corporate English teaching stuff. And so when I moved to LA, what I wanted was a stable career. I wanted like a full-time job. And so I kind of fell into being freelance. And honestly, like the beginning is always going to be hard, and you're going to doubt yourself and you're going to want to quit because like, you know, people don't know you. You're not in the
in the circle.
You're not in the circle. You're not in the ring it. You know, like people, you're not circulating. And so I think like it's just kind of hard. You know, I think if you have the opportunity to like build your skills a lot first, you know, in whatever form that may be, whether it's like, you know, you have time to kind of take time off working and like spend a lot of time and create like a good portfolio or things like that, or if you do have like a full-time job first and you build enough where you feel like, okay, you know, like I have a little stability, I have a little something, and I can take a risk now. Either of those situations, like if and when you're ready to like make that jump, just be prepared for the fact that like it's not going to be easy at first.
Your
like,
door's not going to be getting knocked on like every minute.
Yeah, it just gets easier and easier.
Another thing to remember is never view yourself as a competitor. Always view yourself as part of a community and a collaborator.
That's a great one.
Yeah, always work with other, if you're a freelance artist, work with other artists. They always have something to teach you. You may have something to teach them, and word gets around.
That's a great one.
It's a small community, you know, that'll come, they'll recommend you, you'll recommend them. And that's how you get in.
That's a great one. I mean, I would like to add on to that because
I got some nuggets.
Yeah, that was a good nugget. That was a chicken McNugget.
Lots of nugs.
So I would like to add on to that because I mean, as a freelancer, you get booked times, right? So like, okay, my time slot for, I don't know, the second half of December is booked for this project, right? You get a phone call. Hey, you know, I need you to do this. I'm sorry, my timing's booked, but I can recommend my friend. My friend does the exact same thing. He's really great and whatever, right? And you can recommend. That friend's like, thank you. That was amazing. You know, 2 months later, that friend's going to throw you a job right back at you. You know what I mean? So you always got to think of other people, not as competitors, right? Just like you said, you never know. It's like paying it forward almost, you know, in a freelance way.
There's enough work to go around.
Yeah, that gets back to the insecurity thing. And sometimes people, like even myself, like sometimes I think in the past I was like, oh, my friend's really good. What if I recommend him and then they like him better or something? That's not a good way to think about it. No. It really isn't. You know what I mean? Because there's more than enough work, and it really is true that when you help people out, they want to help you out. Like I've invariably experienced that. I think it's true, and yeah, it's just about building that kind of like network, that community.
Yep.
I think in whatever you do, whatever profession it is, it's like probably the most important thing, aside from being competent at what you do.
Yes, and I think that's a great. Actually, it's like a life lesson. Actually, I mean, it works in every way, not just your profession. It's just life.
Well, I want to go back to something about this that you kind of just blew past in the beginning, is that because we're talking about like see yourself like as part of the community, not as a competitor, but like what you were saying is like, you know, when during your time in Shanghai, you know, you were kind of like you kind of did a lot of different things, and then when you moved to LA, that's when you really wanted to like have like a stable career path and find what you want to do. So eventually you got into animation, and you know, now you're doing it and now you're successful in it. But before you were kind of this outsider and you didn't know, and there was a lot of doubts and hesitation. So I think that's very personally meaningful to me. And I want to hear you kind of explain it or describe that moment or that period in your life a little more in terms of for people who are looking for a new career path later in life than traditionally. People like, you know, like a lot of people, maybe they graduate university and they kind of already know what they want to do and they've been studying it and they go into a job that's in that field and they work their way up all their life. Like I envy that, right? But then there are a lot of people who are not as clear in the beginning and don't really have a clear career path until maybe their mid-30s or whatever, right? A little later than typical. And they're trying to find that career path. And it's really daunting at that stage in our life to kind of dive into a whole industry that you're not a part of, that you don't necessarily have any skills in, that you don't necessarily have any connections in, and you just don't know, but you're interested in it. And it's something that interests you and you want to do it. So it's really scary just to dive in, right? Especially at a slightly later age. So how did you make that decision? How was that experience like for you? And like, what would you tell somebody now who might be going through that same kind of process in their life?
Yeah, I think for me, since I was young, like I kind of always wanted to be an artist or do something like animation or art or whatever. The big problem for me was that there was never a clear path or like a sense that you could be successful at this. And it wasn't something that my parents encouraged me to do. In a sense, you know what I mean? They're kind of like, yeah, well, you got to make money, and like, and I didn't really see like a way for me to do that. I ended up going to I went to Penn State before I transferred to UPenn, and I was in like an art program there, and I just like, it just wasn't the same as being at like in art school. And what I really wanted to do was something like creative art, like entertainment. You know what I mean? That was so far away, and so like it just didn't really seem like a good option, and so I kind of like fell into being into China, you know what I mean? Like, it was like almost like a way to put off like being something. Cause I was good. Like I was really good at French when I was young. Like I didn't even have to like study that much, and I would get A+s on all my tests. And, I remember I took, the first summer I was in college, there was like a choice to go to like Italy or China. And in high school, I'd been to like Italy before, and I'd been to Europe. I did these like little travel abroad things, and so like I went to China, and I kind of was like pretty good at like Chinese like from the beginning. Like I remember like a teacher like coming up to me like, oh, you have some ability for this, like you should think about
language,
like you're good at language, like you should think about learning
And you like the hose too.
not gonna lie, yeah. Not gonna lie, yeah.
She's cool.
Yeah, So a multitude of factors. Yeah. So I found myself here. Yeah, and like it was a good place to be in my 20s. You know what I mean? And it was like you know.
Hell yeah, we know.
Yeah, you know how it is here. Yeah. But yeah, like I literally woke up one day at the end of this. It's like just like one, drunken night after another. Like I think the very like low point, like the end of my time here, there was one night where I got so drunk, I woke up. I literally was walking on the street the next morning at 11:30 a.m. and I came to walking on the street, and I looked at my hands, and I had like no idea how I got there.
Oh my god.
And I called Eric, and my wallet was gone. I called Eric. I'm like, dog, like I'm fucked up. Like I don't have any money. Like you gotta come help me. And he like showed up, and he gave me a few hundred kwai, and I wanted to give him like a bro hug or something. And he's like, I had some like vomit on my shoulder, and he's like, go take a shower. He didn't want to touch me. I had a serious conversation with myself at that point. I'm like, like this is not.
That was kind of like rock bottom for you.
That was rock bottom. Like it just, it's cool. When you watch like the behind the musics where it's like Motley Crue, they're like, they're like partying.
They
like,
romanticize the whole thing.
Yeah, it gets romanticized and it's cool. And then like something bad happens, and then like it brings them down to reality. It's like, this is like,
well, you get to a certain point, right? Yeah. You get to a certain point, you're like, enough's enough.
Yeah. You hear people like blacking out somewhere on their bed, whatever, right? So he blacked out while he was walking, and then after a couple hours, he came back to.
And it's like noon.
And he literally he woke up and he was still walking. So when I saw him, he was like, he had blacked out again after he talked to me, and he was literally walking. So he was not exactly in the same place that he told me, and he was like walking, and I was like, how the fuck do you maintain, like, he was in good shape, he worked out a lot, but he literally blacked out while he was walking, and then came to, and he's like, why am I walking?
Yeah. Yeah. So, that story's a good illustration. But I literally, like I was so gung ho about being in China. Like I was like trying to like, I started like shooting videos and editing videos. Like I knew a couple guys. They actually got hired by Ticketmaster, but they had their own thing. I think it was called Emma Entertainment. For a while, they brought like big acts to Shanghai, and I think when they started working for Ticketmaster, we shot like a Linkin Park concert video. We did like Celine Dion, like we did all these things, and it was.
So at that point, you were already in the kind of like the video.
I was like, I made a decision. Like I want to start doing creative, like I want to do like entertainment. Like
so you
I
just
want to
started
do
from scratch, and you were.
Well, I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
To lose
Like at all costs, I just want to get in.
Yeah, I started doing that stuff here, but like I think the story that I mentioned previously and a lot of things, like I just kind of came to a point where I literally woke up one day and I said like I got to get out of here. Like I just felt like I don't really see like a path for myself here, because I think the people in my mind that came here and were successful, they kind of had a background or they had a career previously that they parlayed into doing something worthwhile here. Whereas me, I kind of like came here and it was like, I think for a lot of people, they may have just spent maybe like a year or two here, but like it kind of like went a little longer for me. And it was like, I kind of woke up at the end of it and I'm like, I feel like I need to take a step back from this and kind of like go back to square one and like start over, like create like a career from scratch.
I remember some of these moments I actually pretty vividly. So we all knew like Rich is a super talented creative person. We knew his love of just the creative things and the visual arts. Like we saw some of the work that he did, so we always knew that this was the path. And I remember talking to you and like you were trying to figure things out, and at that point the industry in China was not like everything else, right? Like what we were talking about, like imagine that the streets were different back then, but also this whole creative industry was really different. And I remember you telling me that it's just sort of like the level of professionalism and a lot of things weren't really quite there. And I think it took a lot of courage, because I remember I was like super sad. Richard and I were like super close, and I couldn't totally understand why he was making this decision, because it was like, okay, so you're going to go back like to square one, you're going to start all over. And like that just took a huge amount of courage, because you could keep putting it off. And like he had to literally go back. I remember you went back to the animation school. So like he had to go back to like elementary school essentially, right? To pick up this craft. And he just picked up and he made the decision. He was in town for a couple more months. We had the farewell, and it was like the clarity of his decision was just something like really, looking back, it was very bold.
But that's so important.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think it was another episode where it was mentioned, I think you said or somebody said it, where it's like you can always think about the result, right? Like, okay, I want to be a superstar. I want to be a filmmaker. I want to be an entrepreneur and be rich, right? You always think about the end result, but then you have to put in the effort, right? You have to make the decision to put in the effort. I want to be slim. I want to have a six pack, right? I mean, it's glorious to think about that, right? But then unless you make that decision to get that, right? And then no matter what, which could mean starting from square one,
and you don't lie to yourself about it.
And you fucking do it.
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest thing.
And I almost think like he didn't have these grandiose dreams. Like he went back, and because this was something that he was so passionate about, he was like, okay, I'm going to start from square one, but I'm going to enjoy it. And he didn't see the school as an obstacle. He didn't see it as a barrier. He actually saw it as something to enjoy. And then I remember like we kept in touch, right? And like we would Skype or whatever, and like he was getting into it, and I remember he was going to the school, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting, because like I see him transforming as a person too.
It's happening.
And then I think about, I don't know, what was it, like maybe 8 years ago I was in LA, and you kind of had already gotten into it, right? And then I saw you about 3 or 4 years ago, and then now you're back in China. So it's interesting. I do have a question now that you're kind of established. And how do you see the industry here in China? And would you ever consider taking on work out here?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think it's definitely grown. But at the same time, like, LA's pretty nice. LA's pretty nice. I have to say, like, I really like. I think the thing that I like, the things I miss about Shanghai for sure are like.
Not the
I really
hose.
miss. No, I don't. Not anymore. I got a nice one.
That's for a different. That's for a different
nice one
podcast.
now.
Yeah, I got a smart hoe now.
No, Rich, that's for a different podcast.
Yeah, Claudia, go to the room.
We're gonna get. We have like a double header perhaps, but we're gonna get Claudia on to hear the other side of the story, the better half.
There's so much I miss. Like I really miss. Like I was telling Claudia, like speaking Chinese for me and like interacting with Chinese people. It's like it really is like a wonderful thing. Like we were in Lijiang at one point. We were at this restaurant. We went there like 2 or 3 times, and this chef came out and he like cooked these eggs with like fresh truffle and stuff. And he was like, he's like, we don't really get a lot of foreigners here. And he's like, he's like, he's like, yeah, I love what I do, and he's like, this is like the very, like, he was like so proud of what he did, and he was like so like happy to meet, and he like took a picture with us, and it was just like, it's like a beautiful, it was like a really good thing, and it just was like so,
Because it was authentic, the
really-
moment was authentic.
it
That's
really
the-
was,
yeah.
like he really was like, wow, like you like what we're doing. He's like, I'm so like proud, and I'm so happy, and it just was like, so it just felt really good, like I really miss that, and like and it's just stimulating and fun speaking Mandarin, and like there's always so much to learn, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's like this whole part of me that I kind of left behind, and like that I had here.
It's like this sense of discovery that you don't necessarily have in LA.
Like, yeah, something like that. I think also too, like, like I look at like
Connection to the Chinese culture. It feels like
it is, yeah. I really love it. Like I really love it, and it's like so there's a lot of negative things to like China. I'm sure you all like you guys experience it too. But there's things I really love about it. There's things I really love about Chinese people. Like they're really wonderful, and like when you really experience that, it's like it's so good. It's so nice. They're really really like good people, and I miss that. I really miss that. And I definitely miss too, like living in Shanghai. It's like it's so nice. Like just you walk everywhere, you take the metro everywhere.
Everything's within hands.
like,
Like
it's easy.
Within reach.
And now you can pay with your phone. I know you guys were using cash on this particular trip, but when you come back, like you do everything with your phone.
Yeah, no, I don't use cash at home. I use credit cards, but if I could use my phone, that'd be even better. I mean, Apple Pay.
It's starting though. It's starting. I feel like America is starting to catch up.
Slowly. In that regard. Like even Apple Pay doesn't work. Like Claudia loves to use Apple Pay, and it's funny because she's like, "Oh, I can use Apple Pay here," and like it doesn't work all the time.
That's Apple.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry,
That's
but-
Apple. They'll get you.
I got a friend that I'll give him a call. Like he works on that kind of stuff.
Yo, dog, yeah.
Yeah, yo.
Dog Tim.
Neo Renjin.
Shout out to Alex Pay. Actually, he works on that team. We'll get that shit working.
Well, that was really. But I have to get your view on one thing. So how do you, like, going back to when you left Shanghai, like how do you just go into LA, the most competitive place on earth when it comes to entertainment and entertainment work? How do you just dive in there? I don't know, how old were you when you?
I was 30.
So you were 30.
I just turned 30.
So you had just turned 30. How do you at that point just dive in there, leaving everything behind in Shanghai, having minimal experience, I guess, at that point in an industry, and just diving into the most competitive, most cutthroat place on earth for entertainment, and just cut your way through and pave your way and pave your way for your own career? How did you do that? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, it was hard. It was pretty hard. I had a lot of help. Honestly, like my dad helped me out a little bit in the beginning, But it was scary because, like, you know, the amount of help I got was like dwindling by the time I actually started. But I think that was good for me. It was good to struggle, and it was good to be like, shit, like it's on me. Like I have to
need that.
You have to, at a certain point, you have to kind of like struggle and like
that fire under your ass.
Yeah, like the fire under your ass, and kind of like like if you don't ever get that, then you're never gonna be anything. Like you have to have that. That was a problem. That was like part of the reason too why I think I moved to China, was like my family, like my mother and father, they if anything, they loved me too much. Like they would give me too much, they would help me too much, you know. And so like it was really good for me. That was part of the reason I think too why I came here, was it was like get away, you know, like get away from them and kind of have to like struggle a bit. But like yeah, going there, I mean, it was hard. It was really hard. And the thing too was like growing up, I was I mean, not to sound arrogant, but I was like I was really good at drawing, like compared to anybody my age. There's nobody in my school. They're like, whoa, like I remember like seniors in high school, like, and I was like in 8th grade, they'd be like, whoa, like they were looking at stuff I was drawing, and they were just like, wow, is this so good, you know, like. So I always had that sense of myself, like, yeah, I'm a good artist. And then I went to LA, and it was like, you're
at the bottom of the totem pole.
You're not that good. You're not that good. And like I hadn't been doing it. I hadn't kept up, you know. And it was really humbling. And even beyond that, doing animation, I went into like 3D. I'd never touched 3D, and I'd never done animation. So I mean, those things, like I sucked. Like, I mean, I look at the stuff I was doing in the beginning, and like I was not good. I was
imagine.
not.
So how did you even start then? Like, how did you even get like your first opportunity in the community?
Yeah, so it was funny because like I mean, one of my oldest friends, he actually like he's in the fine arts scene in New York, which like I love the guy. I don't understand how he's kind of like stayed in that scene, you know, like the fine art thing. But he actually knew about this school called Noman in Hollywood, and he's like, oh, maybe when I was still in LA and considering where to go, he's like, oh, maybe you want to go here. That's where I ended up. I started there, and then it was like I didn't arrive in LA and like know exactly what I wanted to do, so I had to kind of like figure it out. And you know, basically like I wanted to spend the least amount of money possible and like have like a career. I ended up doing this thing called Animation Mentor, which is like these animators from like DreamWorks or Disney, and they critique your stuff. So you submit a video of your animation, they'll do like drawovers, like this is wrong, like punch this up, blah blah blah. I ended up doing that. So I did that. I came out, and then like you know, I get like random jobs, you know, like I just started picking up things very slowly.
So you were freelance right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go, and it was like whatever I could find, you know. I remember I worked for this guy. He was like a trust fund kid. He lived in this like high-rise in Hollywood, and he was neighbors with Frank Ocean. Do you guys know Frank Ocean?
Sure, yeah.
He was trying to pitch this video game for Frank Ocean, who was his neighbor who lived across the hall, and he lived in this giant like penthouse in Hollywood, and he had like a male poodle, and he was like gravity bonging all day and playing Call of Duty, and like he hired me for a couple of weeks. I'm like, all right, yeah, let's do this. Like we were.
What did he hire you for?
Yeah, he hired me. Oh, yeah, we were doing like a video game pitch for him. Like, I mean, it never turned into anything, but it was like I took whatever I could.
Yeah, it was
get.
something.
It was something.
Did you pitch with him to Frank Ocean?
No, but Frank Ocean came over and would hang out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he like would buy like multiples of the same shoe.
Yeah,
And he'd be like, yo, which one of these do you like? Yeah, like,
That's so weird.
Yeah, it was fucking weird. Yeah, it was a good Hollywood stuff. I mean, like, it was weird.
It's like,
Yo, which one?
There's some
and they're like all the same.
No, tell me.
there's some interesting
Which one?
characters. When I visited you that one time, I was like, that was kind of interesting.
Where?
That one apartment you lived in? And then you had the other other creative people in the same building.
Oh yeah, you came over to Eagle's house.
Eagles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like just losing.
Oh yeah, Eagle Wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Eagle
I mean,
That was crazy.
yeah.
Who
I think.
or what the fuck is Eagle Wolf?
Well, so yeah, so I moved to LA and like everyone, like, so I was drinking a lot when I lived in Shanghai, and then when I moved to LA, like everyone smokes weed there. So I mean, I still live in actually the same building. I live in this neighborhood called Los Feliz, and I live in this old building from like, I think it's from the 30s or 40s, and I have a lot of like weird neighbors with like weird names. I have one neighbor named Icarus Glorfindel.
Icarus Glorfindel?
Icarus. Yeah, his name is Icarus.
Is that his birth name?
Yes.
Okay.
Like he gets mail.
Wow.
Like I see envelopes and it's like Icarus Glorfindel.
Wow.
And I had a neighbor named Eagle Wolf. His parents were hippies or something. Like it was like
course they were. Of
Eagle
course they
River
were.
Wolf or I don't know, something like that. But Eagle was like literally, he had the apartment like right next to mine. And this guy's place was like a college dorm that never stopped being a college dorm. It was like all like fucking like black lights and like posters and like macros. Yeah, like Robotech like macros things and like video games. And he was
Figurines.
like figurines
like,
and
everywhere.
like there's like a panther statue. And he was like always like
Then he had that one painting on the wall that would like change. So if you change the lighting, it would go from like day to night. You remember that?
yeah, he had that. Yeah. Yeah.
Like all kinds of shit that would be great if you were like tripping out. Right?
Oh yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, people go over there and like all the neighbors in the building would go over there and just like smoke
out.
smoke out like really hard. Yeah.
Let's go to Eagle Wolf.
Let's go. Yeah, they call
Hang with the Panther.
they call it the Eagle Nest. Yeah.
I want to know that. That's right. The Eagle's nest.
Yeah, the Eagle's Nest. They call it nesting. Like, let's go nest.
So not to change the topic, but what's Inktober?
Oh, Inktober. Yeah, so Inktober is this thing on Instagram. It's this guy who's what's his name? Jake Parker. Jake Parker started it. It's this thing where it's a challenge. It's a social media thing where you do like for the month of October, you do an ink drawing every day for the month of October.
Okay.
And he gives you like if you really want to do it correctly, you follow there's a list of prompts. So it's like random words, and you have to do a drawing that corresponds to that for every day of the month.
And it's a competition, or
It's not a competition. It's like a personal challenge.
Instagram has a lot of those kind of things, right? It's like 30-day, every day you gotta do something.
Yeah. It's something that I like. It's something I've gravitated to, which kind of goes back to something I was talking about earlier, which is kind of like. Not overthinking things and kind of like it's a good thing to practice, like just like doing something every day and kind of like getting it out there and showing it to people. And I've benefited a lot from doing it. So I did this actually this past year, and I did a story for it. It was involving like pigs.
Yeah, I was looking at. Those, they're
riding
amazing.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, thank yeah.
The pigs.
Yeah, it's fun. You know,
Is that a character you created? Like that, just this pig guy? Like
my girlfriend Claudia likes pigs, so she's always like draw pigs for me and like draw bears for me. So
but you make them all muscular and like jacked. and
yes.
shit,
So going back to the comic, it's like comic. Yeah, the comic.
How to draw the Marvel way.
how to draw
pigs
the
Marvel way.
Marvel way. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's hard. It's surprisingly hard. It was funny because I at the same time I was doing that, I was working at this job, which was like, where the guy came up to me afterwards and was like, oh, you really like so happy with the work you did, inspired. I was doing that job that was like demanding, and I was doing this physical fit, like I was trying to like lose fat and kind of like do this like exercise thing. I was working out like 5 times a week, And so it was like really intense. It was just like nonstop, like discipline. Like every day was like, all right, working, doing this. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Like I do the workout and then I get home and it was like, it's time to do the drawing. And the thing that I was happy about this year, like doing it, was like I spent like a lot less time thinking about it. Like I just like get a clear picture in my head and I would just like do it, you know what I mean? And like put it out there. And like there were a few times where I was like, I don't really love this one, but I just kind of, you know,
let's do it.
Try to do it, you know, try to go forward with it. But.
Have you ever considered doing like tattoo art? Because like usually there's a overlap, right? People who can draw freehand really well can usually do like tattoo art pretty well as well.
I never considered doing it for a career, but I do follow a couple of artists that are like they do like visual art and they do tattoos, or they're actual like tattoo artists that may sell prints or things like that. My brother got a tattoo of my art on his arm. Actually, that's the only like tattoo credit I can claim.
Was it a muscular pig?
He is a muscular pig. Yeah, I can say that with 100% certainty.
Well, next time I'm getting my if I get my next tattoo, I'm gonna hit you up and see.
You should, Justin. You should totally do
If you
that.
mock something up for me, that would be awesome. Yeah.
He's like, I only draw the Marvel way though, so you gotta have to deal with it.
Voltron all the way.
Voltron, here, cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, Rich, Claudia, thank you so much for being on the show
thank
today.
you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
This was an awesome conversation.
Yeah,
I
real
don't
pleasure.
think I've ever laughed so much in a podcast episode
Yeah, it was
as
good.
we did today.
Definitely.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Well, that's it, guys.
Yep. I'm Howie.
Justin.
Say hello.
I'm Justin. He's Howie.
Say
I'm
goodbye.
Eric.
All right, guys. Later.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
There is a sad